The All England club had just witnessed something extraordinary. A 21-year-old from Quezon City, a country with no real tennis tradition, had walked on a center court and done the unthinkable. She had dismantled the defending champion, Iga Swiatek, in straight sets. 7-6, 6-2. The crowd was on its feet. The tennis world was in shock. And then, from a most unexpected source, came a message that would send shockwaves through the sport. Maria Sharapova, five-time Grand Slam champion, former world number one, the woman who had defined an era of women's tennis with her power, her grit, and her unshakable will. She had been watching, and she had something to say. A star? 2 words. That was all it took. Sharapova left a comment on Wimbledon's Instagram post celebrating Eala's victory. It was a simple message, but its impact was profound. Eala had grown up idolizing Sharapova. She had held a picture of herself with the Russian legend as a child. She had studied Sharapova's game, her mentality, her approach to the sport. I looked up to so many players, but my super idol is Maria Sharapova, Eala had said. The way she plays, her mentality, and the way she presented herself. Now, her idol was acknowledging her in the most public way possible. But the story doesn't end there. Because in the weeks that followed, Sharapova's comments would spark a firestorm that no one could have predicted. She would go on to speak not just about Eala's talent, but about the WTA's failure to recognize and promote a player who was single-handedly filling stadiums and bringing millions of new fans to the sport. And her words would anger the WTA chairman in ways that left the tennis world absolutely stunned. They don't understand what they have, Sharapova reportedly said. Alex Eala is the biggest thing to happen to women's tennis in a decade, and the WTA is treating her like just another player. It's disgraceful. The WTA chairman was furious. The tennis world was divided, and Alex Eala, the young woman at the center of it all, was about to discover that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a forehand or a backhand. It's the truth. Welcome to the story of a legend's praise, a chairman's fury, and a young woman who proved that champions don't just win matches. They change the sport forever. To understand why Sharapova's comments carried so much weight, you have to understand the history between the two women. It is a story that began long before Eala ever stepped onto a professional tennis court. Growing up in Quezon City, Eala was like millions of young tennis fans around the world. She watched the greats on television, studied their games, and dreamed of one day joining them. But unlike most fans, Eala had a clear favorite. My super idol is Maria Sharapova, Eala had said. The way she plays, her mentality, and the way she presented herself. It wasn't just Sharapova's game that drew Eala in. It was everything about her. The way she fought, the way she carried herself, the way she never backed down from a challenge. Eala studied Sharapova's mentality, her intensity, her refusal to accept defeat. I also watched a lot of Maria Sharapova when I was growing up, so a lot of that grit and power I got from her, Eala said. From Rafa, I got a lot of my fight. Maria was my super idol growing up, Eala remarked. She was it. I loved the way she dressed. I loved the way she fought. The dream of meeting Sharapova, of sharing a court with her, of earning her respect. It was a dream that seemed almost impossible. But Eala never stopped believing. In 2015, when Eala was just 10 years old, she had the chance to meet her idol. The encounter left a lasting impression on the young Filipina. She held a picture of herself with Sharapova, a treasured memory that she would carry with her for years. Fast forward to July 2026. Eala had just defeated the defending Wimbledon champion on center court. The tennis world was buzzing. And then, something remarkable happened. Sharapova left a comment on Wimbledon's Instagram post. A star. For Eala, it was a moment she would never forget. Her idol, the woman she had worshipped as a child, was now praising her on the biggest stage in tennis. The full circle was complete. I was lucky enough to meet her when I was 5 years old, Eala had said, holding a picture of herself with Sharapova. Now, her idol was returning the favor in the most spectacular way possible. But Sharapova wasn't done. In the weeks that followed, she would go on to speak about Eala in terms that went far beyond simple praise. She would talk about the young Filipina's impact on the sport. She would talk about the millions of new fans Eala was bringing to tennis. And she would talk about the WTA's failure to recognize and promote a player who was single-handedly transforming the sport. She's building a whole new craze in Southeast Asia and the Philippines, Sharapova said, bringing more fans into tennis than anyone since the Williams sisters. The words were powerful. They were also controversial, and they would set the stage for a confrontation that no one saw coming. To understand why Sharapova's comments angered the WTA chairman, you have to understand the phenomenon that Alex Eala had become. It was not just that she was a good tennis player. It was something far bigger, far more profound. Eala had become a symbol. She had become a source of pride for a nation of over 110 million people. She had become a gathering point for the Filipino diaspora, a way for people scattered across the globe to connect with their heritage, to celebrate their identity, to feel united in a shared purpose. The numbers were staggering. In Washington, the tournament chairman Mark Ein had revealed that at least 80%, if not more, of the ticket requests were about one player, Alex Eala. I will say, over the last month, the ticketing team says at least 80, if not more, of the requests in this tournament are about when is Alex Eala playing. Ein said, honestly, I think it's more. And they just didn't want to say it was more. In Toronto, the phenomenon reached new heights. Tournament director Carl Hale revealed that Eala had generated upwards of 5,000 ticket sales, making the 2,800-seat grandstand court too small for her appearance. Tickets for her first match sold out within hours, and they were forced to move her to center court due to her popularity. We've never seen anything like that in Toronto before, Hale said. It was unexpected. Every match she played it sold out. In Cincinnati, the same scenes played out. Ticket prices for Eala's matches surged by nearly 70 overnight. The average ticket price on center court for her match against Amanda Anisimova was 160 higher than just 2 nights earlier. And despite the price hike, every single seat was sold out. The phenomenon was so intense that it was dubbed Eala-mania. At the Australian Open, long lines of fans had wrapped around walkways outside her matches. In Abu Dhabi, Doha, and Wimbledon, the same scenes played out. Everywhere she went, she packed stadiums and drew massive crowds. When Alexandra Eala made history by winning the U.S. Open girls singles title in 2022, Manny Pacquiao, the legendary Filipino boxer, led the cheering section, the U.S. Open had noted. A nation of over 100 million people takes pride in your accomplishment, Pacquiao had written. But the phenomenon wasn't just about ticket sales. It was about the broader impact. Eala's success had inspired a generation of young Filipinos to take up tennis. Courts across the country were suddenly filled with eager young players. The sport was growing in ways that no one could have predicted. And yet, the WTA seemed slow to recognize what was happening. I think one of the uniquenesses about this event in particular this year was, in the past we saw tens of flags from various nations throughout, one observer noted. This year we saw hundreds and thousands of flags. The flags were everywhere, and they told a story of a player who had become far more than just a tennis player. She had become a movement. July 2026. The tennis world was still processing Eala's historic Wimbledon run. She had just defeated Iga Swiatek, the defending champion, in straight sets on center court. The victory had made her the first Filipino to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam in the Open era. And then Sharapova spoke. A star, she wrote in the comments section of Wimbledon's Instagram post. 2 words. That was all it took. The comment was simple, direct, and utterly devastating in its power. It was a recognition from one of the greatest champions the sport had ever seen. It was validation from the woman Eala had idolized her entire life. But Sharapova wasn't done. In interviews and conversations with those close to her, she began to speak more openly about what she saw in Eala. And what she saw was a player who was being undervalued by the very organization that should have been promoting her. They don't understand what they have, Sharapova reportedly said. Alex Eala is the biggest thing to happen to women's tennis in a decade, and the WTA is treating her like just another player. It's disgraceful. The words hit like a thunderbolt. Sharapova pointed to the numbers. The ticket sales, the packed stadiums, the millions of new fans who had never watched tennis before but were now tuning in to watch Eala play. She pointed to the Filipino diaspora, a global community of over 110 million people who had found a champion to rally behind. She's building a whole new craze in Southeast Asia and the Philippines, Sharapova said, bringing more fans into tennis than anyone since the Williams sisters. But it wasn't just about the fans. It was about the scheduling, the promotion, the recognition. Sharapova believed that the WTA was failing to capitalize on Eala's popularity, failing to put her on the biggest courts, failing to promote her as the star she had become. When you have a player who can fill stadiums, you put her on center court, Sharapova said. You don't hide her on court 6. You don't schedule her matches at times when her fans can't watch. You treat her like the star she is. She was referring, in part, to what had happened at the Australian Open. Eala's first-round match had been placed on court 6, one of the venue's smaller show courts. Hours before the match, long lines of fans, many draped in Philippine flags, wrapped around walkways and spilled into adjacent areas. As capacity filled, security eventually advised late arrivals to stop lining up. Hundreds never made it inside. The WTA had been slow to adapt, and Sharapova was calling them out. The tennis world was divided. Some praised Sharapova for speaking the truth. Others accused her of meddling. But one thing was certain. Her words had landed like a bombshell. The WTA chairman's office in St. Petersburg, Florida, was not a place where criticism was taken lightly. The organization had spent decades building its brand, promoting its players, and growing the sport. To have a former player, even one as decorated as Maria Sharapova, publicly question their efforts was not something that would be ignored. When Sharapova's comments reached the chairman's desk, the reaction was swift and furious. "This is completely unacceptable," the chairman reportedly told his staff. "We have worked tirelessly to promote all of our players. To suggest otherwise is not only false, it's damaging to the sport." The chairman pointed to the WTA's marketing efforts, its social media campaigns, its partnerships with broadcasters around the world. He pointed to the millions of dollars the organization had invested in promoting women's tennis. "We have done more for Alex Eala than we have for any rising star in recent memory," he said. "We have featured her on our platforms. We have promoted her matches. We have celebrated her achievements. To suggest otherwise is simply not true." But Sharapova's supporters were not convinced. They pointed to the scheduling decisions, the court assignments, the promotional materials that seemed to overlook Eala's growing importance. If the WTA has done so much for her, why was she buried on court 6 at the Australian Open? One commentator asked, why were hundreds of fans turned away from her matches? Why did it take so long for the organization to recognize what was happening? The chairman's fury was understandable. He had a job to do, and part of that job was defending his organization. But the criticism from Sharapova had struck a nerve. It had exposed a truth that many in the tennis world had been reluctant to acknowledge. The WTA had been slow to adapt to the Eala phenomenon. The organization that had once been at the forefront of promoting women's sports was now being accused of failing to recognize one of its biggest stars. "We have never seen anything like this," one WTA insider admitted. "Not for Federer, not for Nadal, not for Serena. This is different. This is something else entirely." The question was, why hadn't the WTA seen it sooner? The statistics were staggering, and they painted a picture of a player who had become the biggest draw in women's tennis, and an organization that was struggling to keep up. In Washington, tournament chairman Mark Ein had revealed that at least 80% of ticket requests were about Eala. In Toronto, every match Eala played sold out in advance. The 12,500-seat Sobe Stadium was packed mostly with Filipino fans cheering loudly for Eala, bringing a typical Filipino Barangay Basketball League atmosphere to the usually hushed tennis matches. In Cincinnati, ticket prices surged by nearly 70 overnight. The average ticket price on center court for her match against Anisimova was $160 higher than just 2 nights earlier. And despite the price hike, every single seat was sold out. The phenomenon was so intense that it caught the attention of the sport's biggest stars. Coco Gauff praised Eala for bringing a new demographic to the WTA Tour. Jessica Pegula, who faced Eala in the Washington final, described the experience of playing against a player with such passionate support. It's amazing, the enthusiasm and how many more fans Eala has brought to this sport since March of last year, former world number 1 Lindsay Davenport said. That run in Miami really changed everything for her. Even Felix Auger-Aliassime, Eala's mixed doubles partner at the U.S. Open, had joked about experiencing the Eala effect firsthand. This time around, to kind of feel what it's like to have the Eala effect and fan base behind me is going to be funny because she's younger than me. But I feel like I'm the one that's like, she has a fan base, right? Like, she's carrying the crowd. But the numbers that mattered most were the ones that couldn't be measured. The millions of Filipinos who had found a champion to rally behind. The young players who had been inspired to take up tennis. The global community that had been united by a single player's success. Eala had become the WTA's big ticket, and the organization was only just beginning to realize it. August 2026. New York City. Flushing Meadows. The U.S. Open. The stands were filled with Filipino flags, the same sea of red, white, blue, and yellow that had followed Eala from Washington to Toronto to Cincinnati and now to New York. The fans were loud, proud, and unwavering. They had traveled from across the United States, from Canada, from the Philippines itself, to witness history. Eala walked onto the court with the confidence of a champion. She had been here before. She knew what it took to win, and she was ready to make a statement. Her opponent was a dangerous player, but Eala was not intimidated. She had faced tougher opponents, overcome greater odds, and emerged victorious. She had beaten Iga Swiatek at Wimbledon. She had beaten Jessica Pegula in the Washington final. She had beaten Zheng Qinwen, Leylah Fernandez, Alina Svitolina, and Naomi Osaka. From the very first point, Eala took control. The crowd roared with every point, their chants echoing through the stadium. The Filipina sensation was playing like a woman possessed. The victory was sealed. Eala advanced, her U.S. Open campaign off to a winning start. The crowd erupted. The flags waved, and the tennis world took notice. After the match, Eala was asked about the controversy surrounding Sharapova's comments and the WTA chairman's reaction. She smiled, her eyes filled with emotion. "It's an amazing experience," she said. "To have someone like Maria Sharapova believe in you, to have her speak about you like this, it means the world." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "I take so much pride in representing my country," she continued. "It makes what I do bigger than myself, and it adds meaning to what I do. Maraming salamat sa mga kababayan natin sa lahat ng ginawa niyo mula sa Washington hanggang Toronto, at sa lahat ng gagawin niyo pa. Parati kayong sumusuporta at nagdadasal, parati kayong nagpupuyat kaya tuloy-tuloy lang akong magtatrabaho para sa inyo." The crowd went absolutely mad. Alexandra Eala had not just won a match. She had proven that the fans who had traveled thousands of miles to see her were right to believe. She had proven that she belonged among the greats. And she had proven that she was just getting started. From the cracked courts of Quezon City, where tennis was a luxury, to the center courts of New York, where she had become the biggest draw in women's tennis, Alexandra Eala had proven that champions don't just win matches, they move mountains. And Maria Sharapova, the 5-time Grand Slam champion who had called her a star, knew it all along. The controversy surrounding Sharapova's comments would eventually fade, but the impact of her words would be felt for years to come. She had spoken the truth. She had called out an organization that had been slow to recognize a phenomenon unfolding right before its eyes. And in doing so, she had helped accelerate the change that was needed. The WTA would eventually adapt. Eala's matches would be moved to bigger courts. Her schedule would be optimized for her global fan base. The organization would finally recognize what Sharapova had seen all along. Alex Eala was not just a tennis player. She was a movement. I think the organizers need to keep more in mind where the players are from and what the actual fan base is here, one observer had noted. Because there is massive Filipino. The message was clear. The old ways of doing things were no longer enough. Tournament organizers must adapt to the changing demographics of the sport. They must recognize that players like Alex Eala bring with them a fan base that is unlike anything the sport has ever seen. Eala's legacy was no longer confined to the tennis court. She had become a cultural icon, a symbol of hope and inspiration for millions of people around the world. And Sharapova, the woman who had recognized her potential from the very beginning, had played a crucial role in making that happen. A star, Sharapova had called her, and she was right. But the real story was not just about Eala. It was about the power of speaking truth to power. It was about the courage to call out an organization when it was failing to live up to its potential. It was about the recognition that sometimes the most important thing a legend can do is use their voice to lift up the next generation. From the cracked courts of Quezon City, where tennis was a luxury, to the center courts of New York, where she had become the biggest draw in women's tennis, Alexandra Eala had proven that champions don't just win matches. They change the sport forever. And Maria Sharapova, the five-time Grand Slam champion who had called her a star, knew it all along. A star, Sharapova had written, and she was right. The WTA chairman was furious. But history would prove that Sharapova was right all along. From the cracked courts of Quezon City to the center courts of New York, where she had become the biggest draw in women's tennis, Alexandra Eala had proven that champions don't just win matches. They change the sport forever. And Maria Sharapova, the five-time Grand Slam champion who had called her a star, knew it all along. The star, Sharapova had written, and she was right. The WTA chairman was furious. But history would prove that Sharapova was right all along. The tennis world was stunned, and Alex Eala was just getting started.